You ever get that feeling of just being done with social media? That feeling like you're constantly performing for some invisible audience instead of, actually connecting with people? Well, turns out you are definitely not alone. There's a whole new way of thinking about our online lives that's starting to take shape, and it's all about moving away from these giant one-size-fits-all platforms and towards something a lot more human. This quote just nails it, right? It gets to the very heart of the problem, something called context collapse. It's that little bit of hesitation you feel before you post something, that moment you start wondering who's going to see it and how they're going to judge it. That's it. That's the feeling of being on a stage. And honestly, it's exhausting. It makes us sand down the interesting edges of our personalities to please this massive, jumbled up audience. So that's the big question we're going to unpack in this explainer. Why have our digital hangouts turned into these weird, high-stakes theaters? And way more importantly, is there a better way to do this? Is there a better way to build our online world? All right, let's dive in. To really get the solution, we first have to look at the problem, the current model. Most social media today is built like a global square. Just picture one enormous centralized town square where billions of us are all shouting at the same time. And well, that model is starting to show some serious cracks. And this chart, wow. This really shows what happens in that global square. It's called the 90-9-1 rule, and it means a whopping 90% of users are lurkers. They're watching, but they're not saying anything. So why is that? The source material calls it social surveillance. It's the fear of being judged by that huge, faceless crowd that keeps most of us quiet. It basically turns the internet into a spectator sport for almost everyone, and a stage for a tiny few. So, okay, if the global square is broken, what's the alternative? Well, the idea is to completely flip the script. Instead of one giant platform, imagine a huge network of countless, smaller, more focused communities. So, welcome to the idea of the digital city. Here it is, side by side. This is the core difference. Instead of one network with 3 billion people, you have 3 million networks with maybe 1,000 people each. See the shift? It's a move away from performance and that feeling of being watched, and a move towards real authenticity and a sense of belonging. And the control? It moves from some central company to the communities themselves. You're going from one loud, chaotic marketplace to a whole city of unique digital neighborhoods. And this is really what it's all about. In a small group of people who all care about the same thing, whether that's 50 people or 500, your voice can actually matter again. That fear of the crowd just kind of melts away, and real, genuine interaction can start to happen. It's all about making the time we spend online feel valuable again. Now, this isn't just some nice-sounding philosophy. It's an actual engineering project. You can't just build a digital city out of thin air. Just like a real city needs roads and power grids, a digital one needs real infrastructure. So let's take a look at the 4 pillars that actually make this whole model possible. So what are the pieces? First, you need the actual building blocks so you can customize your space. Then you need a kind of legal system to keep it safe. You need a way to build trust, a form of identity. And finally, you need a marketplace to make it all sustainable. These 4 pillars, they all work together to create a space that's adaptable, safe, trustworthy, and can actually support itself. Let's break them down one by one. First up is the modular framework. And honestly, the best way to think of this is like digital Legos. Instead of being stuck with a one-size-fits-all feed, community builders can create the exact space their people need. If you're a bunch of software engineers, you can build a super deep technical forum. If you're artists, you can build a shared virtual gallery. The tools actually adapt to what the community is trying to do, not the other way around. Next up, governance. We all know that moderating these huge platforms is, well, basically impossible. But in a smaller digital city, you can use fine-tuned AI as co-hosts. Now, these aren't the clumsy corporate algorithms we're used to. They're trained on the specific rules and the specific vibe of that single community. They act like digital sheriffs, handling the day-to-day issues and protecting the culture, so the human leaders can focus on growing the community, not just policing it. The third pillar is all about identity. And look, privacy doesn't have to mean being totally anonymous and chaotic. A unique universal identity, or UIID, works kind of like a digital passport. It proves you're a real human being, and it lets you carry your reputation with you from one digital city to another, all without having to hand over your personal data to some giant company. It creates a baseline of trust. And finally, any good city needs a self-sustaining economy. This model lets community owners do things like charge for premium access or special services, But even more importantly, it lets the citizens themselves earn a kind of currency for providing real value, like mentoring a new member or organizing a cool event. And the whole system is supported by a tiny micro-tax on activity, which is just enough to keep the lights on and the digital streets safe. So, we've got the blueprint for these digital cities. But this isn't just about building better online forums. No, this infrastructure is really the foundation for something much, much bigger. Let's look at the future that this kind of model unlocks. The next big step is something people are starting to call Web4. This is where the digital world starts to layer right on top of our physical reality. And this is where the digital city idea really comes to life. Imagine walking into a park and, through your phone or a pair of glasses, seeing digital art installations, community notice boards, or even the avatars of your friends floating in the air, all anchored to that real-world spot. It turns social networking back into just socializing. This quote just says it all, doesn't it? Right now, on the big platforms, we don't own anything. We don't own our communities, we don't own our data, we're just renting space. And the landlord, the platform, can change the rules whenever they want, they can mess with the algorithm, or they can just kick us out at any moment. This new model changes all that. So the whole point of building this digital city infrastructure, it comes down to one word: sovereignty. It's about handing the keys over to the citizens. It gives every subculture, every group of hobbyists, every local neighborhood the tools to build and, crucially, to own their own little corner of the internet. And that really brings us to the final thought here. This isn't just some technical change, it's a creative one. It opens up a universe of possibilities for how we can connect with each other. So the question I want to leave you with is pretty simple. If someone handed you the keys and the toolbox, what kind of world would you want to build?